About some churches defying warnings against large gatherings, multiple clusters of coronavirus cases being traced back to churches across the U.S., some later moving meetings and services online. Others rejecting protective measures and putting congregations at risk. Compounding the issue, religious carve-outs in many statewide stay-at-home orders, including in Florida and Texas. A review by CNBC finding of the 15 states in the nation home to the highest percentage of especially at-risk individuals, at least 11 were not barring religious gatherings as of Thursday morning. Joining me now is Catherine Stewart, author of The Power Worshippers: Inside the Dangerous Rise of Religious Nationalism. She's also a New York Times contributor. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us. We should be clear that those state religious exemptions are not limited to a specific religious group. In fact, you're arguing there's more to the responses that we're seeing, which is religious nationalism. You have a New York Times op-ed titled "The Religious Right's Hostility to Science is Crippling Our Coronavirus Response." Walk us through your thinking a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Well, that's true. My concern here is not with any particular religious creed, but with the political movement that often cloaks itself in religious rhetoric. So there are a number of ways in which the religious right bears some responsibility for the current incompetence in our national response. First and foremost, the movement promotes an anti-science culture that rejects the evidence of science, rejects expertise and critical thinking, and that has obviously contributed to our ability to address this issue and this crisis in an evidence-based fashion. Misinformation is rife in these sort of hyper-conservative and also highly politicized religious communities that we're all in for Trump. Secondly, and this is becoming, unfortunately, incredibly obvious right now, we have a poorly developed collective infrastructure, the kind of infrastructure you need to craft a collective response to a collective crisis. And that is a consequence of far right-wing economic policy, government bashing, and religious nationalism bears some implication, is implicated in that too. The movement has allied itself completely with a kind of libertarian far-right economic wing of the Republican Party, and so it shares some of the blame that falls on that group. Religious nationalists have also supported politicians and policies that have led to the privatization of healthcare and the hollowing out of the social safety net. So that's.
Let me ask you really quickly, and let me just ask you really quickly. From what I've seen a little bit about this, there are some churches who are holding online services, who are trying to encourage their followers to abide by these stay-at-home orders. What have you, from what you've read or seen or studied, have you seen a difference as to why some churches are and some churches aren't? I mean, I'm curious to get your thoughts why some have closed their doors and encourage people to go online, and others are saying we're going to defy these orders and still have these congregations.
Well, religion is incredibly complex. As you know, American Christianity, evangelicalism is an incredibly complex movement, religious group in our country. And so there's going to be a variation in the responses, of course. But there is a kind of segment of the religious right that has taken a kind of all spin, all politics, sort of hyper-partisanized view of the world. And they've often actually rejected the evidence of science, as you know, and also spun everything for political gain. And so this idea that we need to sort of stay home to flatten the curve is often cast as a kind of actually an attack on Trump, an attack on their faith. And that's why I think many of the movement leaders greeted the news of the virus as an insult to Trump, which was kind of astonishing. As late as March 13th, Jerry Falwell Jr. went on Fox and Friends to call the response to coronavirus hype and overreaction, and he said it was an attack on Trump.
Right. Well, we certainly hope that leaders of any faith heed the warnings coming out of health officials as this is a public health pandemic. Catherine Stewart, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today. Thanks for watching this hour of MSNBC Live. I'm Ayman Mohideen.